if you ever had to look out for inspiration uh, during some of the tough days that we are in, we always look out for role models. Nikhil Malhotra is one of the role models and inspirations whom I have met in my career of last couple of decades. When we speak about Nikhil, it is more about technology, innovation, and also courage, because courage takes you much forward in your thinking and your ability to do things. So, if I had to define Nikhil in one word, it will always be courage. I'll do a quick introduction about Nikhil. I have a short write up, which I'm sure a lot of us would enjoy listening to during the conversations with Nikhil in the next 1 hour. Nikhil is the Chief Innovation Officer and creator of Makers Lab, a unique incubator. With more than 20 years of experience, he has been a researcher all his life. Some of the technology initiatives that he has been driving are in the lines of AI, machine learning, robotics, quantum research within Tech Mahindra. He has also designed an indigenous robot in his lab as a personal assistant. One of his vision is to enable machines to talk in local Indian dialect. This is one of the most interesting work, I believe, Nikhil, you would be doing in your career and your journey. And as you have rightly said, there's so many dialects in India. To make a machine understand Indian language is next to uh, a very challenging task by itself. So the way we are trying to have this next 1 hour, Nikhil, and I'm sure the audience wants to quickly hear from you, is we encourage audience to ask questions on Facebook Live, and also I'm unable, and also have a look of. I'll also be keeping a close tab on the Zoom channel that we are on. But Nikhil, first things first, we would want to just where did you find the courage
Mm.
and the energy to start something as vast as Makers Lab, and how does your day normally look like? How do you start your day? Who inspires you the most?
So I think, first of all, thank you so much, Shreyas, Sairi, and of course, all the attendees. It's a pleasure being here and talking to the Zen Alpha team. I think there are a lot of questions mixed over there, Shreyas. I'll answer them one by one. I think my journey, number one, what gives me the strength or the fact that that we do whatever we do at Makers Lab. I think that question needs to be asked from a genetic perspective to my mother. I was never a quiet child. I was always bubbly. I could never sit in one place. But I think from my journey perspective, what we do and how we started it, I finished my post-graduation from Australia, did my MTech, joined as an IBM, as an IBM software engineer, and then went into research, did my first codes on Watson also. I like to now tell people that some of my codes may be running here and there in Watson. But that may not be true. The idea or the bug of AI really caught me when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And people of our age would remember a serial that used to come in called Star Trek. And now it's basically a much more wider perspective and a larger perspective of TV series and channels. But that was the only Sunday program that I used to watch, with eyes wide open, because I could possibly look at the way technology was being brewed into that entire program. One spaceship, with doors and windows opening up on its own, with, some fantastic gadgets to play with for people, got me into technology, of course, or got me thinking into technology. And I still like to thank my mom and dad to have a TV at that point in time to have me look at that particular program. Otherwise, this wouldn't have been possible. But I think really from that point onwards, the bug for machines, the bug for how humans interact with the machine, the bugs with, the whole facet of what is there from a human perspective and how can computers really solve. Even though we touched computers a little late in our lives at that point in 1990s, they really caught on. And I came back to India and joined Tech Mahindra. 2014, and you know the story well. 2010, I went to US, spent about 4 years in US, and 2014 I got really bugged. Two reasons for it. Number one, this country was changing in its perspective. I think the Modi government was really evolving the way the Indian startup ecosystem was shaping up. There was much more fervent value of what technology could be given. So I came back to India and I started this Makers Lab, which was basically started in a wet kitchen area. वहाँ बर्तन धुलते थे, and we started that wet kitchen area. And I think, how did it start? I think it takes a village to possibly grow something like Makers Lab over the last 6 years. वो कहते हैं ना, लोग आते गए और कारवा बढ़ता गया. That was the whole situation, and I would not take the entire credit. There were so many people involved who were like-minded, who wanted to do something different, who wanted to get into principal research and development, who wanted to get into the why of things, which possibly made Makers Lab happen. Well, beyond COVID or before COVID or maybe after COVID, our life in Makers Lab really starts off by the moment we get up by thinking about an idea. What do we do? And what inspires us most at workplace Makers Lab is normal people you face in daily lives. And I think that is a big and a huge inspiration sector for us. Can we solve some of that problems that people face day in and day out? Make a commercial value out of it, and can we have technology solve some of those problems that we get within Makers?
Absolutely, Nikhil. I believe, as you rightly started the concept of Makers Lab in a very unique place. You mentioned about technology, innovation, courage in some shape and form in some of your previous discussions, which I've been listening on TED. While if you have to look at courage, I believe it is the young child or the young children in our ecosystem from whom you take the courage from. Where do you drive your courage? Where do you get your courage in terms of your ability to think big?
No, you're absolutely right. And I think it is from a kid itself. And I think I generally believe in that you should never let the kid die out of you. You can die out of a kid by becoming a man or a woman, but let the child within you never die out. And I think that gives you immense amount of courage. And the word courage itself, if I have to break down, is not just strength or muscles or power. The word courage in itself translates into the paradigm of courage itself. So when we say courage, and you would see this in your kids typically happening, C means collaboration. And when you see your kids working together in school, they would have no hookups or hang-ups of collaborating with people. And that ecosystem, we somehow, because of what we grow into, we develop a kind of a shield amongst ourselves to not collaborate with people. And I think that is important for people because that is one factor of courage that gives us. The O is objectification. Give a kid a new concept or a new thing to try out with. Unless and until that child really breaks open that component, he would not objectify everything, and he would not come back with a full confidence that he's learned those things, right? So objectification is very, very important. When you ask a kid whether you'll be able to make this or not, the kid really comes back and says, I would be if I'm confident. So that forms the you part of the courage, which basically means that each one of us is a maker. So you are the maker for this. The R really says, can you rewire your psyche when you grow up? It's important to rewire your psyche because your heart is an organ that continuously pumps blood 24/7. It's the brain that constantly needs a little bit of rewiring. And that is what is required for people like us who grow up to actually go into. The A is, of course, asking stupid questions. Have you ever asked a kid, and have you ever told a kid, oh, just shut up? It's a stupid question that you are asking. Never. Because that stupid question or perceivably stupid question simplifies a challenge for the kid. Now, when we grow up, we essentially lose that ability to ask stupid questions for want of, or for a lack of better word, that what would people tell us? What would people do? The G is basically goals. Kids don't have goals. As we grow up, we normally don't have goals ourselves. But if you have to have a goal, why not make a goal which is actually superfluous and which you may never be able to reach, but you'll be able to reach at some point in time? And this is a philosophy which Apple follows very particularly, which says that if you have to land on moon, think about landing on Mars first. And moon would automatically the way to essentially get your goal. And easily empathy with yourself. A kid is most empathetic first with himself or herself than with the outside world. When you essentially draw up courage to do something very different in the world of technology, or very different in your life, the first empathy comes with you, that you have to be empathetic to yourself and not to the partner, customer, or somebody else, or as you may deal with. So कहते हैं ना, if you go into a plane, the announcement that comes up is wear your own mask first before you put it on to an infant, because it is important that you live or you empathize with yourself first, because as an innovator, you will go into despair. You have to take yourself out. So by my role being the chief innovation officer, or having the team work towards innovation, one of the best ways that we say is that this courage can actually break open the word courage. You would essentially see this courage translated in segments. Follow this in your life, and this will always be guiding you for the next big leap that you want to do in your life.
Wow, that was fabulous, Nikhil. Breaking up courage into collaboration, objectification. You as a maker, ask stupid questions, goals, empathy. I believe while a lot of people speak about courage, it is very tough to define what courage exactly means. It is not about waking up one fine day and thinking that we go ahead and conquer something impossible, but break it into logical steps for us to understand the ability to do something more meaningful. This in the conversations we have had, Nikhil, over the years, I remember your passion towards enabling machines for Indian languages. And you spoke very passionately about bringing in Sanskrit as the domain language in terms of a universal language to make machines understand a larger verbatim or dialect. How would you want to explain it to the audience? And this is something that always perplexed me. How would you relate Sanskrit to the universal languages, to making computers understand that language in a simplified manner? Because we have a lot of young parents, a few young children on this platform, just very curious to hear on the ability to make machines understand the local language.
Yeah, so I think if for a brevity's sake, as I research more and more on languages, I get more and more perplexed these days. And the way these languages are connected to one common source really baffles me. I think before I explain why language of Sanskrit needs to be given and why our kids need to go back, and I think we are very blessed that we are living in a state like Maharashtra, because people tend to speak that language. Otherwise, we would only be conversing in the official language, which is English. And I think kids I still find in their homes talking in Marathi, in their own Hindi, or whatever, wherever this region may be. And I think that has been one of the best things that Maharashtra as a region offers to me. But I think having said that, there has been two formats of evolution of human mankind. One, of course, is vision, which is eyes. And over the period of millennia, if you go to about 200, 300 million years ago, when human race or when species really evolved, you have seen that a spurt of evolution happened within a million years, which could not happen in 100 million years. One of the reasons for that was vision. When you had eyes, or when you had something to see in front of you, you could evade target, or you can even as a predator find prey from an evolution perspective. The second biggest evolution that happened was the language that happened with us human beings. And that language has possibly given us the dominant structure of the species that we are today on this particular planet. It's communication. I can communicate with you either in English, in proper English that I'm speaking. I can communicate with you in broken English as well. But you, and somewhere your cognition tends to understand it and tends to draw up a meaning out of it. Now, when I was researching on NLP, typically Watson, when the whole idea was how can you give machines a language? The idea was, what does language theory really entail into itself? There are two formats of a language. One is that people, and this has been done with the old Indian grammatical theories, that how does a brain or a human brain express its thought? That's the way we speak. and how does a listener decode information? And that's the way a listener speaks. Now, the challenge over here, and this has been very, very well defined by Indian grammatical theories, typically Panini, who wrote the Ashtadhyayi or wrote about Sanskrit, was that your thoughts are always a continuum. If you close your eyes today, and unless you are in subconscious state of sleeping, you would continue to have some thought or the other, which is basically bounded in terms of time. It's like a string or a pearl string that keeps appearing as thought to you. Whereas the words that you use to express yourself are very, very discrete. And those words in discrete mode are basically words that has been given to you by the grammar of that particular language, whether it's English, whether it's Hindi, whether it's Marathi, etc. Now, what happens is that these two operate at different bandwidths, and there's a trade-off. Now, when I want to speak to somebody, I want to ensure that I keep a balance between the brevity and the precision of what I'm speaking. I want to be as brief as possible, but I want to convey my thoughts as precisely as possible. This has not been done before Panini. And this has not been done before Sanskrit, because that's why it's called Samskrit, or well-formed kind of a language, because it basically took these components and placed it. So Panini's genius was only three. Panini said, how is the information encoded in the speech of Sanskrit that we speak? Where is that information encoded? What centers of the brain does it really preclude when that information flows out? And basically, what is that information which the other person would get to speak or get to hear, etc. over there? Now, there are some examples that I can obviously give the attendees over here, saying that if it's a simple English word saying a man goes to a village, a Sanskrit pronunciation for the same would be Purusha Gramam Gachati. Now, Panini's genius was, where is this information encoded? It's in Gramam or it's in Gachati. And Panini gives a revelation of sorts when he says it's in the ti or the Gachati or the verb where the information is encoded. Now, if I only write a sentence, Gramam Gachati, it means the same thing. Somebody goes to the village. If I write, but the same sentence, if I go in English, it will say village go. In Sanskrit, if I only say Gachati, it also explains the meaning that somebody is going to the village or somebody is going somewhere. And if I say Gachati Gramam also, that also means that somebody is going to the village only. English will completely deflate this language. So with minimalistic amount of information spoken, you can actually get to the meaning of the language and convey that meaning back to the listener as well. And this is why Sanskrit, somewhere or the other, whether you make databases out of it, whether somebody is coding, somebody is trying to basically put up something in a machine, seems to be the most appropriate choice for you to actually understand a language by a human computer mechanism. And that's why our research on Sanskrit. But as I keep researching on Sanskrit, I just read a news article today that the Chinese characters itself have also evolved out of Sanskrit. And some of the Chinese characters have been written to evolve out of Indus script or Brahmi script. And some of them even have the Sanskrit words over there written as well. Now, this gives us a big connotation of why we should all learn Sanskrit as kids, as parents, or as human beings, but also how can we apply some of those facets within the computer format as well. And the best part is that India today, and I like to say it, Shreyas, which I told you last time as well, India for a long period of time of 200 years suffered from something called as a Lord Hanuman syndrome. जब तक बताया नहीं तब तक लंका को लांघेंगे नहीं, या जब तक बोला नहीं कि आपके में शक्ति है, and it needed somebody like a Lord Jamban to tell Lord Hanuman saying, boss, you've got the strength, go ahead and fly, and you would be able to cross this sagar and go towards the other side of Lanka. Indian ecosystem now should change to the facet that we've had enough science, enough logic, enough information which is embedded within our own Vedas, within our own texts, within our own history, which we can utilize with logic and science in the modern application world as well. And I think that is what I do as part of the other things that I do within Makers Lab and my team, is to basically bridge that gap between the old science as well as the modern science system and bring it out with this AI, machine learning, and some of the other mechanisms that people are trying to do. So, you know, in a nutshell, we have enough information in our Vedic texts and Vedas to essentially give us the right perspective about the world that we live
Excellent, Nikhil. That was really very useful. And this brings something very interesting in one of the questions that we have had. Maybe it's one of the questions from a parent. I'll try and read it out. We'll uh, the question from the parent was, what are some of the most important skills when it comes for young children? Is it knowing a language? Is it knowing technology? Is it knowing any kind of self-development skills? And how do you connect the old with the new? You said the old science with the new science. And that's why I wanted to pick this question up. And what would be useful, because we know it all, जैसे हम पढ़ते हैं in some of the research papers, that there is disruption happening everywhere. There is chaos obviously in the corporate world or in most of the economies today. What would be that one skill or a set of skills which children should make it a habit so that they are much more able to take forward maybe into the competitive environment, because collaboration you mentioned is going to be at the global level, which is part of the courage ecosystem. Is there a set of skills or the next generation skills that you normally would want to share with the younger folks on this call, on this
So
chat?
if it was a corporate forum, I would have said, please go ahead and learn AI, use a, you have extended reality, you have IoT and robotics, have quantum computing, all of those skills. I think this is not a corporate forum. This is for parents, and we'll have to be honest about it. But I think as per me, there are only two skills that possibly kids may need in the future, and also kids may possibly utilize as your ward or your young one is basically going through these, through the schooling era or years. One, the question of finding the why has to be very, very important and has to be baked in with our kids. The what and the how, these kids will learn automatically. And the reason is because of the history that we have gone through. We are the solution bowl of the world. Sometimes it is also called as the extended medical shop as well. Before you can actually raise your voice, I will have the answer and I will also give you the solution. It is like a medicine box. Give me the problem, I will give you the solution. It doesn't matter whether the solution applies or not. Come back to me after some time and solve this problem by another goli or another medicine that I may give you. So the one way of doing it is that we have been doing it for the last 200, 300 odd years, or maybe in the last 10, 15 years in terms of IT services, where we are essentially opened up as a medical store or a medical shop. The what and the how are very clear. What do we have to do? How do we have to do? That is where technology would come in. The why gets missed very often. And I think if our kids can possibly learn art of why, where exactly the problem lie and why does a problem lie, I think that's a very, very important skill for the future generations. So it's not about kids who can solve a problem. It's about kids who can quantify and objectify the problem with a why statement. That will be a skill that will be required. And what can we do? I think I normally do it with my little one who's about 6 years of age and now goes to first standard days. I try and break the problem and I try and give it from a different perspective, so that he applies his brain to understand why the problem occurs rather than the what and the how. The what and the how is already taught in the school. They teach you what is the challenge, how do you solve that challenge. Why typically gets missed in our education system. And the reason for that is because we've been following some board structures. We've been following CBSE, we've been following IGSE and all, God knows all sorts of board systems and academic systems that we follow. If we follow the Gurukul system, the Gurukul system essentially started off with the why of the problem. And there's a small anecdote. Panini, when he started teaching Sanskrit to a young group of followers that he started collecting, his first question was, and I don't know how many of you know the Maheshwar Sutras, but the Maheshwar Sutras is a group of words that actually define the entire language of Sanskrit and entire language of Hindi as well, or basically all the Indian dialects. That particular sutra has two words, ayan, rit, etc., etc. There are about 14 lines. Panini started the teaching of Sanskrit by not teaching lakar, by not teaching ling, by not teaching what kind of roop it may be. He started with a problem saying, can you solve, if I speak this word, what all format of Maheshwar Sutra would be incorporated? So he started with the why of the problem rather than the what and the how. The second skill that these kids, and I think the kids of the next generation would really need to have, is the ideology of creativity. It does not matter if you found the why, the problem could only be solved by one simple mechanism. Creatively, if you could think about different use cases and different value, different ways of solving the same problem, it does solve the problem in the end. You may not get marks in an exam because the teacher had told you that the algorithm or the way to work is only step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, but you somehow did it step 1, step 3, step 2, and step 4. There was a different way of solving it. But logically, a creative bent of mind will have a larger place to play or work to do in the next generation. We are already looking at machines that can code themselves. We are already looking at machines who can do much better. I think kids of tomorrow in the next 10, 15 years will have two sorts of things to comply with in the future, which is one of their own consciousness and one machine consciousness that may evolve into the machine. Now, in that scenario, the ability to understand why is this being done and the ability to creatively maneuver that format within a machine would be utmost important as per my this thing. So if you have to teach, and if I have to teach my kid, and given the power, two of these segments, find out where the problem is and get the why of it rather than the what and the how, and have a creative way of solving that problem. If you found out that step by step can actually improve a kid's cognition value as well.
Brilliant, Nikhil. In fact, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes over here to share one experience. We did an all India inter-school competition, and surprisingly, we took the topic. We took a topic which was slightly, I wouldn't say easy. It was more about ideation contest for technology. We encouraged children between class 3 to class 8 to write an essay about a big idea on technology, which will help improve the society. We got some 1100 odd entries across India. And maybe I'll speak about the topmost entry, which was the winning entry over here. It was by a little girl from Calcutta, La Martiniere, Calcutta, called Avni Sakseria. Avni had one idea where she said, with the start of the pandemic, there has been a huge challenge for young students to get books.
Yep.
Because schools are closed, so are the bookshops. So her idea was to create an ecosystem which could create an exchange mechanism between the seniors and the juniors in terms of trading books. So if I'm passing out from class 7 to class 8, I would be getting books from my seniors in class 8 who are passing on to class 9, and create a chain of flow down in terms of these resources. And it also helps children to reutilize these resources. So that was the first idea from Avni, which was the winning idea. In fact, she also had another idea which we are mentoring today in terms of creating a platform. And that's why you mentioned the why part and the creativity part. There are almost 30 million stray dogs in India at that. That's a huge problem. There is little amount of care that we can afford because of various. So Avni's idea was about creating a passive care ecosystem where you can enter details. If you have a stray dog somewhere in your locality, you can quickly put the details into the system, and the nearest pet care center would be alerted, saying that this is where it is. You can go ahead and take the dog over to that center, and people can passively adopt dogs without actually getting a dog to your own house. You can passively adopt these dogs from the shelter care and fund resources on a continuous basis. So the idea was to create and reutilize resources, obviously from a books perspective during the lockdown, and the creativity which comes in terms of originality of the idea, and technology is just an enabler over here. So just sharing couple of points from one of our role models in the country who has thought of some brilliant innovative ideas.
No, absolutely. And I think, Shez, the whole process is that, people used to say, please start thinking out of the box. I think the that we start saying is there is no box. So if you believe that there is no box, then you have more ideas. Otherwise, you would keep limiting yourself to the box and the idea behind it or the idea beyond it. I think the ideology is there is no box. Let's start from a blank slate and say what. I think kudos to Avni, because passively adopting a dog has never been done before. But with this idea, she brings in creativity and the why of the problem. Why do I want to keep a dog? Because I want to actually put in a little bit of love for that dog as well. But I don't have the money, or our homes are smaller for want of size or etc. But this way is beautiful because it essentially gets to the root of the problem and also solves it effectively. So yeah, so that's the whole idea behind it.
Correct. Nikhil, I know you have been working to spread the knowledge of technology at the grassroots level, and that's the passion which I see within every conversation that I have with yourself. And I was fortunate enough to interact with some of the team members at Makers Lab. Would you want to just share a couple of bits where you have taken technology at the grassroots level? That's something which is very important for us as a society, and the ability which Makers Lab is contributing back to the overall ecosystem. We would be absolutely excited to hear something on those lines.
Yeah, so my stint with basically people at grassroots, and I think I'll just start with a disclaimer. I think urban India needs to learn a lot from the rural Indian sector now in terms of what they're doing and what kids are doing with innovation. Just to give you an example, I'm a part of the mentoring program for AIC, which is Atal Incubation Center. And they have a program called SIP 3.0, which is basically student innovation program. So they basically take solutions of students to the society as well. One of these programs, I happen to be there, and these are a group of kids who actually travel 45 kilometers in a remote town in Jharkhand to go to a village, to go to a school. Imagine this, 45 kilometers on one side of the walk just to get to school and come back to their home. This area where the school is there, it's basically from a very, very low economic background, and a large number of kids suffer from malnutrition. Now, you may call it serendipity, you may call it science and thought. Accidentally, one of these kids dropped hara saag, lal saag, and bajra on a piece of land. And the weed that grew out of that particular system or structure of soil, they took the leaves and they actually started making juice out of it. Over the period of 3 months or next 3 months, they have actually cured malnutrition at about 90% of the population and kids over there, which I say grassroots innovation, which basically can not just solve a problem in grassroots of India, but I think a large sector of people within African and other subcontinent regions can possibly benefit from this kind of society. So rural India or India at a grassroots, we really need to look at what they're trying to do. From our perspective, what I'm trying to do is, I and my wife is basically, she teaches on one of these platforms. She teaches coding to kids, etc. But she's always had one common connection with me, and she says, kids that come from, let's say, an English background, they understand the English part of the language, but they don't understand. But kids who come from a background who have, let's say, speaking our own mother tongue more often than not, they don't really understand the other part of the language as well, or maybe they are slightly little behind with the kids who understand English. Now, that gap is only because of the language English. We can solve that gap out. And I decided to work independently on making this. And I'm very happy to release this. If I may share the screen shares, if you will allow me to. I have made this kind of an editor, which is called the Bhamal. And this is basically Bharat markup language for HTML, so that every kid in India can actually now code in his or her own language, not dependent upon English. Of course, it has got some words of JavaScript over here, but HTML, if you notice, is all in Hindi. You can take the same value in Marathi. You can take it in Odia, Gujarati. You can take it in Kannada. You can take it in Punjabi. The reason for that is again the same. The reason is that we do not want to limit the next growth of technology from our kids, especially because they do not know English. And I don't think English is beyond an official language. English is nothing. We still speak in our own mother tongue. We still have those thoughts in our own mother tongue. Can we not incorporate technology in the mother tongue that we speak? And that is the provision that I want to do for grassroots of India. And that comes in from my background of language and what I read and study about. But these are some of those examples. So my suggestion to parents and on the other kids listening is, if you speak in your own tongue, that's fantastic. You can definitely learn English because that's the official language of the country. You will get some work done. But having said that, your language in itself from the basic premise carries much more information than the alien language that you may get into. If you can learn technology in that language and implement it, there's nothing stopping India for the future in 2050.
This is so brilliant, Nikhil, in terms of the editor, HTML editor, which you had, not restricting children with the knowledge of English to actually go about coding. This is true impact of contributing at the grassroots level. And one point you also mentioned, there's a lot we can learn. We feel that the rural India is behind the urban India, but it is not.
It is not. Unfortunately, that tides have changed because they can now have access to information. They can work it out with their own technological quotient, and they can apply it in the question of. So India is the fringe of all of nations, Shreyas, if I may, right? And when I say fringe, it's not negative connotation. It means that we will have the use case which is not be available anywhere in the world. Now, if you think about autonomous driving cars today in US, well, they have rule system as well. Come down with an autonomous car to India, where you do not know which species would cross the road and how would the light change. I think the premise is very, very different. What that premise makes India is that it is also the center boiling pot of all of use cases. When I say use cases, it may be solved this way. So if you've solved a problem in India, I believe you've got the pedestal to solve it anywhere in the world, because there is no other use case or a divergent system that will appear to you in the world as it will appear in India.
Absolutely. Truly a boiling point where innovation can take place for a universal, at the universal level, which happens in a country. There are a couple of questions, Nikhil, which are coming on the chat box. And one of the parents, the first one is from Ujjwal. As a non-technology background parent, how should we embrace the fast changing technology, especially when it comes for our children? So a lot of parents are non-tech in background, and children are expected to catch up very quickly on technology. How should a parent react to it? Or how should he or she embrace it?
That's a stumping question, but Ujjwalji, thank you so much for that question. First of all, I think I may not be able to satisfy with an answer, but I think a large number of parents who do not know technology today, and I think please ensure that this is not a backdrop of a problem. You may have learned technology, you may not have interest in technology, but that doesn't make it that the parenting value is good or bad. But I think a large part of the parent or a parent community that does not understand technology also fear technology. And I think first and foremost, you'll have to remove your fear of using something. There are enough checks and balances, unless and until you're doing an e-commerce transaction over technology, where you have to be a little careful of what you do and what you don't. Enough checks and balances available in today's ecosystem and technology that will not allow the user to go wrong. And mostly it's about 3 or 4 clicks and buttons that are available in the entire world. That's number one. Number two is basically being a vociferous user of technology yourself. You have a phone, utilize it through all its functions and figure out what's going on. You may have a LCD smart TV, utilize it. I think a large percentage of questions that kids may have would also be solved through common sense because of your usage and application of technology. You do not need to be expert in technology to answer a kid's question or a children's question. Definitely, if the question is, if the kids are 7th graders, 8th graders asking a very particular scientifically logical question, then you may have to give them to people like Zen Alpha, or maybe come to us at Makers Lab and we will train them on technology. but I think from a large percentage of kids' question would be very, very commonsensical. You don't try and answer it primarily because you are either fearful of that answer, it may go wrong, and what would the kid think about me, and what would I think about myself, etc., etc. So don't do that. I think one thing is not be fearful of technology, and second is usage of technology. You should start using it, because that's the ultimate gain which we are going through. Unless technology takes us through the wrong route, it's the biggest shot in the arm as an augmentation for a human being in the next coming up world, right? In the next 10, 15, 20 years. So we rather be users, or rather be users than laggards for the technology itself.
Amazing. This is one more question which has come in. I believe we'll take this. But one question, Nikhil, I always wanted to ask you before we take the next parent question. Were you a bright student at schooling days? Were you an average student, an above average student? Were you the one who was the favorite of the teachers, or always at the mischievous part of the journey? How was your schooling and
So you'll have to ask that question for my mother, but I would consider myself, I was a very, very bright student. I was the school topper and also the university topper. But at the same time, I never left doing wrong things in the school. And there were plenty of mischievous items that I've done. Plenty. And I think when I had my first son born, my mother said, it's good that you've got it. I hope that he's as crazy as you and as naughty as you, because you understand the other end of the table as well. But I was very, very naughty, but I was extremely, good in studies, and I was extremely, I was possibly the topper in school as well as the university as well. But having said that, there was no connection. I did my part in equally in all sorts of mischief that I did in the school. Did more than enough. So you see, my hair today is actually black. I actually colored it completely blue. So, and this was done way back. I think my mother realized it and she actually shrieked, "What have you done?" But I was very, very mischievous. I still am, if you ask my wife and mother today, but that's a different story.
No, absolutely. And I still believe, Nikhil, there have been so many incidents working with you in the last few years when I was fortunate to be part of those conversations. Uh, the ability to articulate the problem statement and the ability to challenge the thinking which came along should have been from someone who was really mischievous. It cannot be done by a bright student. I can say for that. That is the couple of questions which are coming on, Nikhil. If we are taking questions from parents and young children, there's one question that came on: is do you think innovation can be taught? That's one question. That's just
Innovation cannot be taught, Ujwalji. I think it can be nurtured. Innovation is, I think it's become more of a misnomeric term, and more people, what they use to actually make it much more cooler that you are innovative and you're doing this. I think I've seen innovation coming out even from the grassroots level, as I told you, but even from local workers that actually work in your office or around your home, etc. I don't think innovation can be taught. It's a state of mind. It's a state of a rebel. It's a rebel state where you want to ask questions. I think the questioning power can definitely be taught. And that is something that schools should nurture. And we as parents can nurture even better with our kids. You should always nurture the power of questioning by a kid. However stupid that question may look like, however wrong that question may be, you cannot dismiss an answer. And I think if you basically explain it in a very, very logical way to the kid develops an ability to ask those questions. And innovation, the seed of innovation is the questioning power. Can I question what was shown to me in a different way? And when you do that, you automatically get into the route of innovation, which is not taught, which is basically your own human ability.
great. That's brilliant, Nikhil. There's one question that's come in from Yashashri More, and again, it's a tough one. With the start of the pandemic, a lot of children have started with live online classes. First time in their generation, or first time maybe in In a long time, we have seen everything going on live. There is always pressure of studies. There is always pressure of being very close to technology. Is there a way you feel this could impact young children, the social abilities to connect? Have you seen that in the last
It's
few months?
definitely impacting. It is definitely impacting, and I won't mince words, Yashasvi. I think you're absolutely right. But I think we'll have to live with this. It's basically our own doing. As a human species, we've got it on ourselves. These signs were there even before the pandemic signs and the signs of a virus overthrowing, or a zoonotic case or a zoonotic virus that comes in from an animal to us have been there in the past. We've not taken heed to it, and now it has become kind of a catastrophe. I would feel that we are lucky enough to be only left away with this catastrophe. Because at least for us, as a carrier, then we would have not seen human species progress further as well. So I would take that as a positive. But having said that, I've seen the ability to connect with or what kids had when they were going to school has certainly been hampered. And I'll give you an example. My younger one is only about 1.5 years. He's turning 2. Not 1.5 years, he's turning 2 next month. The way my older one gathered language, because he was going to a school, he was talking to friends, he was talking to teachers, he was gathering concepts at a faster rate than my younger one, because he's not gone to the school. He's basically started walking in captivity. He learned whatever he learned on language in captivity within the lockdown itself, and the only thing that he speaks is colors nowadays. So when he wants to reflect to me, he even tell me the color of my shirt and not papa. He would not call me dad. He will not call his mom mama. He will call us by the color of the things that we are wearing, which is again a reflection of the thought of what we have gotten into. And that ability would have been much more cognitive and much more better had he gone to school. But that is a general effect. But on the positive and the flip side of it is that it should be soon over in the next year. In the next 5 or 6 months, this should soon go down. And our kids can hopefully go back to school from August, September onwards, as the case may be.
Absolutely, Nikhil. I think these are tough times, even as parents, children, as a society in the last few months. But all kudos to young parents who have taken it all, and also children during these times of
Yeah,
distress.
yeah.
They've shown positive signs to
So
keep.
human beings are generally resilient. We are generally resilient. Put us in a box and mouse out of the box.
Got you. We're coming close to end of time. Maybe we'll have a couple of questions which we'll take, Nikhil. One of the questions which had
We
come.
are resilient. Very, very. And kids are even more resilient.
Got you. Yes. It has shown, I think, the last few months, kids have been extremely courageous when it came to taking on these times of distress. Nikhil, there's one question which has come in from the crowdsourcing when we are reaching out to parents for this talk show. They were eager to hear what is that one technology which you feel will be the most disrupting uh, piece of technology in the next decade that we are entering now, and
Yeah.
why?
The only technology that is going to disrupt us is basically AI and application of AI to our use cases. The second most disruptive technology that will pull AI across would essentially be quantum computing. The universe on which we stand is fundamentally very different from the physical life and reality that we see. And that quantum computing world, and I can take a kind of a refresher course with parents if they want to, will fundamentally change the very facet of what coding kids do. Coding would completely change. AI in its own mechanism will get augmented. In the next 5 to 10 years, we are even looking at machines building quantum consciousness out of it. And that technology will disrupt the very future and the foundation of technology that we see today. So for people who say that it's going to be AI, they fail to recognize that AI was at one point in time, it's a 60-year-old algorithm, which is now being written by a machine which is much more faster because of the compute power and because of Moore's law. When that Moore's law ends, the only thing beyond it would be the quantum world or the quantum computing world. For parents who are from physics background would understand this, but I can take a kind of a refresher system as to what quantum world would mean to them. So AI and quantum computing would disrupt the world in the coming decade.
Excellent, Nikhil. Nikhil, this is maybe one of the last question. We're just ending the time. Um, you've spoken so passionately about technology. You've spoken so passionately about reaching out at the grassroots level. How do you keep yourself self-motivated or encouraged? What is that mantra that wakes you up every morning, every day, and gives you the energy to make an impact? Is it something you draw from yourself or your surroundings or from your family? You want to learn from you. What is the mantra? Where does the energy come from?
So if it was a different story, and I think kids would not listening, I would possibly say, "मेरे दिमाग में chemical लोचा है थोड़ा सा." I can't sit idle, so I have to keep thinking about it. But I think I keep my inspiration has been everyone who actually has left an impression. My friends, people who have connected with me in some form or the other, and I have only one skill, if I may, that I have a keen observation and an imaginative power. I keep thinking about it as to what can we do something different. And right from childhood, where my mother and father taught me patience, to my connection when I got married, to my wife, my kids who actually do this day in and day out. All of this is a kind of inspiration. But what I do is I actually keep a track of things, what I've learned, and what is the current connection to it, which keeps me going every day, because every day there's a new challenge to solve. Today, my kid, just to give you an example and not tweeting the horn, was basically my kid was learning about some language, etc. And when I went to learn about the same thing for him, I found out that the Chinese characters, there was a course on Chinese characters, how do you write 1, 2, 3, 4, are so similar to Brahmi and Indus, which got me thinking maybe AI could possibly give us the answer to the Indus script, which has been eluding scientists and researchers all over the world. Gives me a new problem to think about when I sleep in the night. Gives me a new problem to start off my day as well when I wake up. So that constant push of a circle, where you keep thinking about new concepts and ideas, or you keep challenging yourself every single day and say, there is another problem to solve. Why are you resting? Because there's so many problems to solve, will always keep us going. And I think that is what keeps me going. So थोड़ा chemical लोचा है दिमाग में, तो चलता रहता है वो, और कुछ नहीं.
I think someone like you, Nikhil, we would want to, if possible, understand the DNA within your brain and learn a lot. If possible, make a digital twin of yours to ensure that we get more of Nikhil Malhotras in our ecosystem, and the inspiration that you have brought in, not just for young children, for people working around you, for young parents. I think this is phenomenal. Uh, is there, if you maybe, I'm very much keen to ask this last question is before we sign off. You mentioned about imagination being important. You mentioned about courage. You mentioned about a lot of other technologies which will disrupt us. If you have to give one single message to our young parents who are bringing their children in these times, in these chaotic times, and one mantra saying, is it freedom, or do you think something else for them to make the child understand and realize much beyond what they do on a regular basis going to school? What would be their mantra?
So my mantra is very simple, and this is what I follow personally, is basically open the world to your kids and then be ready to answer each and every question. And if you do not have answers to that question, be ready to research with your kid. I think that has two valuations. The kid learns and we learn it, and not all the answers are available with all of us at all times. But be ready to open the world to the kid. Do not close the world down, because that's the only thing that will open up the imagination for a kid. You cannot say that my kid will not go to a screen time, but will go to a play area, will not go to play and will only look at, books and study about it because there's so much to do. I think the day has been given to us for 12 hours. Open the entire world to the kid. Talk about anything and everything under the sun with, of course, permissible limits that you've been given, or we all have. And then be ready to answer questions that these kids have. Do not stem the flow of questions from your kids. That's the only thing that makes them learn. If you stem the flow, you are essentially not asking kids to learn. And then When you've gotten enough grasp of the subject that the kid has, if you've not gotten, you go and research it. Then ask that question in a very different way in the practical form of life that the kid may answer. This neuroscientifically has been shown is the only way in which a kid's synapse grows. And synapse is the seat of memory learning for every little kid. And their synapses are so elastic that they can learn one language every week if you want them. It's not just English or it's not just Hindi. They can actually take a grasp of a language every week up till the age of 8, when the synaptic fluid and the synapse connection starts reducing down. And by 18, our synapses are completely full in our brain. So that any new learning, you have to do about 10,000 hours of effort. And there's a book about it that you do 10,000 hours of effort or 21 days of cycle so that it gets into your memory. That the reason for that is that the synapse have become hard to essentially bring that culture of history and memory into your system. For a kid, it's all open up till the age of 8 and up till about 13 or 14, till the kids get into teens. Their synapses are fluid. Get them as much value of information that they can get, so that when they come to the age of 18, they've got enough perspective of the world and enough questions to ask too. And those questions will make them innovative, and those questions will make them succeed in whatever they want to do.
Absolutely, Nikhil. This was brilliant. I think the kind of messages that we heard today were truly of inspiring in nature. You spoke about imagination, you spoke about being courageous enough, not being fearful about technology, usage of technology, the why part, the creativity part. It is so much relevant today than ever before. Firstly, I would want to thank you to spend this valuable time of yours with our parents. We'll be posting this with all our parents in the community, at least who are closely associated with us. Roughly some 1,500 parents are currently engaged in some shape and form with the initiatives that we are currently doing within the part of our country. And there is so much that we can always learn from you. I'm sure we'll also share some of the TEDx talks that we have been on in terms of neuroscience and machine learning. I'm sure some of the parents might ask a detailed session to be taken sometime later in next year. But Nikhil, thank you so much to come on board,
Thank
spend
you
your
so much,
time,
Shreyas. Thank you, Saili. I think it's a
share
pleasure.
your, it is a wonderful session for all of us. Extreme gratitude from the team at Zen Alpha. And the only request that we would have from our behalf to you is keep inspiring us. We are closely watching you as a role model for many that you have been. And I'm sure you will be an inspiration for all of us as always. Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you. It's amazing. Thank you. Zen Alpha is creating that next platform. Thank you, Shreyas, Saili. Brilliant.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you, Nikhil. Thank you.